In this lecture, we're going to talk about the role of a speech-language pathologist in oral rehabilitation. As you know by now, a speech-language pathologist has roles within all the spans of throughout the lifespan from newborn to geriatric. And as you can see on this slide, that there's many, many different things that a speech-language pathologist can do for individuals, no matter what age they are. And so what does this look like in terms of oral rehabilitation? So, as you may know by now, educational requirements for a speech language pathologist, the uh, basic degree that you need is a master's in speech language pathology and a year of fellowship or externship called the clinical fellowship year. You must pass boards to receive licensing and accreditation. And then you also need to have ongoing continuing education credits to fulfill licensing requirements. Speech language pathologists achieve certification from the National Association ASHA as well as state licensing. What does assessment, intervention, consultation, and collaboration look like for a speech language pathologist who's involved with oral rehabilitation? The first thing that we need to consider is assessment. So, one of the things that is really important to me that I bring to this oral rehabilitation class as a speech language pathologist is understanding how language is connected to hearing and hearing technology, and how an individual is able to use that hearing technology effectively helps to support language across communication domains. So it's a little bit more transparent to think about how hearing might relate to speech or phonology and even morphology as we think about high frequency morphemes like plurals, possessives, or third person singular. But really, hearing impacts across all of the communication domains: phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. And so we're going to be talking about throughout this class about the interaction between language, language development, communication, and hearing technology. So, one of the things that we would need to do as a speech language pathologist is ensure that we're assessing communication needs, and needs might be the environments that the individual is communicating in, who the communication partners are, and also the modalities. Now, one thing that I think a lot about is how we think about how oral rehabilitation works really connects with the language stage of the individual that we're treating. So, for a pre-linguistic individual, for a baby, we are really going to be thinking about oral rehabilitation in terms of play, cognition, and gesture. We're not going to see a ton of expressive language from someone who's pre-linguistic. But with newborn hearing screening, we might often have oral rehabilitation for someone who is brand new to this world. So, a little infant. As they start developing more language and they're perilinguistic, they're learning language, we're going to want to know about what is happening successfully in terms of communication and what are some of those challenges, and to be able to address both of those, not only from a language lens, but from an audibility lens, and being able to see how that hearing technology is providing enough access for that individual, for that child to be able to develop communication across all of these domains. Now, assessment looks a little bit different when we're thinking about post-linguistic individuals or someone who already has developed language. We might need to better understand what their motivation is for coming into intervention or to be able to get hearing technology or get a cochlear implant. We might need to be able to look at what their concerns are, as well as how are they communicating and what are the functions of hearing in their day-to-day life. And this may vary from individual to individual. And so this is part of how we integrate in core and care to be able to think about what individually does that person need to be able to be successful in their environments with their communication partners. So there's a variety of assessments that we might do. Sometimes a speech language pathologist can be involved with a pre-implant evaluation. We can potentially look at a prognosis for how an individual would do with a cochlear implant. We might be also be looking at the baseline of skills. Speech language pathologists can be involved with progress monitoring and also in eligibility for school services. Sometimes we're involved at looking at dismissals when an individual has made enough progress. And then sometimes we're also involved with differential diagnosis. It's important to consider that the language level will really be an important factor to be able to think about what types of assessment we're going to do. Again, I just want to highlight how important it is that we're assessing across communication domains, that we have a key understanding of how hearing can impact communication. And then in this oral rehabilitation world that we are living in this class, we want to ensure audibility. This means that the individual can hear across all frequencies and that we are better able to understand when they're not hearing across all frequencies, what that looks like, and how do we communicate this with different team members, most importantly, the audiologist. Now, I did mention differential diagnosis. And so, one of the things that we might need to be able to look at is how hearing loss may look different than someone with another potential diagnosis. And so, there is a time when speech language pathologists have to be able to understand both hearing and hearing losses, as well as they have to understand other other diagnoses that may exist and be able to look at what are similarities and what are differences. Approximately 40% of individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing have additional disabilities. So sometimes we have to do a differential diagnosis, and sometimes we have to layer our understanding of the two disabilities and try to think about how do we work together, or what is some ways that we have to be able to address both of those communication aspects. Now, when we're thinking about intervention, it's really important that we think about how to integrate hearing and the use of hearing technology into communication. We're not thinking about these as being separate aspects of communication. And the reason this chocolate chip cookie here is because when we're building a cookie, we're cooking a cookie and we put in flour and butter and eggs and sugar and chocolate chips. Each one of those things together makes a cookie. We don't really just work on flour or eggs or butter. We have to look at all those things together. And so the same thing as we're thinking about with intervention is we don't want to be able to think about, well, this is my speech section of my therapy, this is my language part of my therapy, and this is my hearing part of my therapy. All of these things need to work together in an integrated little cookie of communication. We need to make intervention meaningful, functional for that individual in terms of their family, and their life. So again, just to talk a little bit about what speech language pathology intervention might look like in oral rehabilitation across the language stages. So in pre-linguistic intervention, we are going to definitely be thinking about home-based and family-centered early intervention. With a 3-month-old, we are not going to be able to take that baby out of their daily life and do therapy with them and then put them back in. We are going to want to see how the family works with their baby, how the family interacts with their baby, what does it look like at home, and we want to integrate auditory skills throughout their daily routines and do everything we can to support an environment of rich communication development. Similarly, in perilinguistic, we're going to be thinking about family-centered intervention, that we're not just going to work just with the child, but working with the child and the family. We still want to integrate auditory skills throughout the different daily routines, and we want to support communication development. We may not just be in the home for children who are toddlers or preschool age. We might be also at schools or their community, the parks, and really want to think about the different types of communication environments that child is living in and communicating in. Then for post-linguistic, it could be working at a school or a clinic. As the child or as an individual becomes post-linguistic, we really are going to focus more on the client, but we still want to be able to support the communication partners, look at the communication demands of the individual, and look at the context and the modalities that they're using. We're going to do everything we can for all of these stages to support communication success. We also, as speech language pathologists, can be involved with informational counseling, providing information to the client, as well as personal adjustment counseling, talking about how they can make adjustments in their own personal interactions and lives and advocate for themselves so that they are more successful with not only their hearing loss, but also the hearing technology. And sometimes this can happen individually or also in support groups. One of the most important things that we can do as a speech language pathologist in oral rehabilitation is provide a team approach. We, as speech language pathologists, bring communication to the team. We can validate the hearing technology in real life contexts. We can see if the child is meeting developmental milestones, if an adult is hearing effectively in different communication contexts and with different partners, and has the ability through hearing to fully participate in their daily lives, whether it's a classroom or different settings throughout the day. So these are some of the key things that a speech language pathologist brings.